The moment the new images arrived, everything changed. For weeks, the world had been waiting, wondering what NASA and the James Webb telescope were seeing out there, behind the silence, behind the hesitation. And then suddenly, without warning, the first frames were released. One look at them was enough to make every astronomer freeze. 3I-ATLAS wasn't dissolving. It wasn't fading like a dying comet. It looked sharper, cleaner, more defined than it had any right to be. Bright, but not glowing like gas solid, but not behaving like any rock ever observed. It sat against the darkness with a kind of presence, as if the object wasn't drifting through space, but holding its own place in it. The first thing scientists noticed was what wasn't there. No dust, no ice, no vapor tail, nothing that a comet, especially one that just survived a violent perihelion event, should be producing. The sun's radiation should have torn it apart. Instead, Atlas looked untouched, as if the eruption near the sun hadn't weakened it at all. If anything, it looked stronger. That was the first sign that something was wrong. The second came from its movement. Objects that pass the sun follow predictable arcs. They loop, they slow, they fall back outward. Every rock, every comet, every stray fragment from the Oort cloud obeys the same physics. But 3I-ATLAS didn't slow down. It sped up, not away from the sun, but sideways, out of its own orbit, drifting into a region it should never have entered. NASA's orbital model showed a smooth, expected trajectory. The new images showed the truth. Atlas wasn't on that path anymore. It had drifted millions of kilometers off course in a direction no natural force could explain. Solar wind can't push an object that large sideways. Outgassing can't maintain that precision. Gravity can't create that maneuver. Something had changed its motion. Something internal. And when the Virtual Telescope Project released its own independent images, the situation went from strange to unbelievable. Their data showed Atlas rotating in a way that didn't match its brightness pattern. The rotation was steady, deliberate, timed, not random tumbling like a comet, but a rhythm, a pattern. Almost as if the object was balancing itself, maintaining some kind of stability. Then came the thermal readings. James Webb's infrared scans showed temperatures that didn't match sunlight alone. Certain regions were warm, too warm. Other areas, far from the sun's illumination, were colder than physics allowed. Something inside the object was absorbing heat, and something else was distributing or trapping it. Natural surfaces don't do that. Natural bodies don't regulate anything. The more data arrived, the harder it became to call this thing a comet. And then another detail emerged, the one that made scientists stop speaking mid-sentence. The surface of 3I-ATLAS wasn't chaotic. It wasn't jagged or fractured. It was smooth, geometrically smooth, straight-edge transitions, flat planes. Symmetry where no symmetry should exist. If nature created this, it did so with the precision of an engineer. Some analysts tried to dismiss the shapes as shadows or angle distortion, but the consistency was undeniable. Every time the object rotated, the same ridged contour appeared. The same reflective patch pulsed. The same shadow pattern repeated exactly. Comets don't repeat themselves. They crumble. They shed material. They deform under heat and stress. 3I-ATLAS looked like it was holding form, maintaining shape, preserving structure. That alone was enough to cause panic in several scientific teams, but the real shock came from a single unexpected measurement: spectral reflection. When James Webb analyzed the light bouncing off the surface, it detected something astonishing. The reflectance curve matched materials that were not dust, rock, or ice. It resembled hardened carbon compounds, ceramic-like substances, and radiation-forged polymers, all of them incredibly resistant, all of them unbelievably old. As one researcher quietly said off record, it looks manufactured, not recently, but by time itself. Radiation can sculpt matter in strange ways over billions of years, but it doesn't create symmetry. It doesn't produce angles. It doesn't leave a surface looking like it was designed to withstand stars. And that's when the shift happened, when scientists stopped asking, "What is Atlas?" and started asking, "How is it doing this? Why did it brighten so sharply? Why did it survive the sun when physics said it should have disintegrated? Why did it change direction? Why was it accelerating? Why was it so perfectly intact after what should have been a catastrophic event?" None of the answers made sense. But one possibility kept forcing its way into the conversation. What if the object wasn't reacting to the sun? What if it was responding? What if the explosion at perihelion wasn't random at all, but triggered? What if Atlas wasn't destroyed? What if it woke up? That was the fear behind NASA's silence. It wasn't just that the images were strange, it was that the images made everything we thought we understood about interstellar objects collapse at once. This wasn't a rock. This wasn't ice. This wasn't debris drifting from a dead star. Whatever 3I-ATLAS is, it's behaving like it has purpose. And as the images continued coming in, one thing became terrifyingly clear. It wasn't slowing down. It wasn't fading. It wasn't stopping. It was getting worse. And it was only the beginning. The deeper NASA looked, the more unsettling the images became. Every new frame from the James Webb telescope peeled back another layer of confusion, another rule of physics that 3I-ATLAS seemed determined to break. At first, scientists hoped the brightening was just a fading after effect, a dying comet catching the last breath of sunlight before drifting into darkness. But the object didn't fade. It stabilized. It held its brightness with a precision that seemed almost intentional, like a signal refusing to dim. Then came the spectral data, the one thing scientists hoped would make sense. If Atlas was just a strange comet, its chemical signature would reveal the truth. But the readings that came back weren't ordinary. Webb detected materials that shouldn't exist in combination: hardened carbon networks, shock-fused minerals, and strange composite layers formed under cosmic radiation for unimaginable lengths of time. These weren't the ingredients of a comet. They were the markings of something ancient, something that had survived conditions no natural object should endure. Even worse, the surface wasn't behaving like rock or ice. Certain regions absorbed infrared radiation instead of reflecting it. Others glowed from within, faintly but consistently, like heat trapped beneath a shell that shouldn't happen. A dead object doesn't regulate temperature. A drifting fragment doesn't trap heat. Whatever was happening inside Atlas wasn't chemistry. It felt like process. And then researchers noticed the repeating pulse. At first, they thought it was leftover noise from the explosion at perihelion, just thermal stress echoing through the surface. But when the data was aligned, every pulse came at the exact same interval: 6 hours, 12 minutes, 34 seconds. Not a second longer, not a second shorter. No comet in the history of astronomy has ever displayed such perfect timing. It wasn't random. It wasn't natural. It was a rhythm, a cycle, a clock. Across NASA teams, people whispered the same question: what is the countdown for? Independent observatories began picking up the same pattern. The Very Large Telescope in Chile measured micro-brightness variations matching the pulse. The Subaru telescope in Hawaii detected polarization shifts happening in sync. Even the faint radio hiss from the object fluctuated at the same interval. The pulse wasn't an artifact. Something in or around Atlas was generating it deliberately, repeating it, maintaining it. Scientists searched for natural explanations. Stress fractures impossible, internal pressure cycles, no known object that small could sustain them. Rotation. The spin rate didn't match the pulse timing. Nothing made sense. Every natural explanation collapsed under its own. Contradictions. And the more they tried to fit Atlas into known physics, the further it drifted out of reach. That's when the trajectory changed. Again, Atlas wasn't slowing down as comets do. It was accelerating gently, but consistently, as if following a path only it could see. NASA recalculated the orbit dozens of times, hoping for an error, but the numbers were clear. The object had shifted course a second time, smoothly, deliberately, moving into a more stable arc that kept it perfectly aligned with the solar system's equatorial plane. No comet in recorded history has ever corrected its orbit like that. Inside the International Asteroid Warning Network, specialists started comparing Atlas's movements to spacecraft maneuvers. They found something chilling. The object's lateral shift matched the kind of micro-adjustments used in orbital stabilization systems, small, precise course corrections made by probes to maintain optimal alignment with targets. Atlas wasn't drifting. It was steering. The question that no one wanted to ask now became unavoidable. If this behavior wasn't natural, what was it? Avi Loeb, who had followed every interstellar anomaly from Oumuamua to now, reviewed the new data, and made a statement that NASA was not prepared for. He said the object's motion was consistent with guided behavior. Not definitely artificial, but not random, either a middle ground that was somehow more terrifying than either option. Meanwhile, James Webb spotted something else, something hidden in the heat signature. Beneath the dark crust, under layers of radiation-forged material, there were regions that seemed hollow, cavities, chambers, spaces where the internal temperature shifted differently from the rest of the object, not uniform. Not natural, almost structured. This discovery never made it into press briefings. It leaked quietly from someone inside the spectrograph team, someone who said it looked like the inside wasn't frozen solid. Something about the thermal map suggested pathways, channels, the kind of structure that forms not by pressure but by intention. NASA didn't respond to the leak. They didn't deny it. They simply stopped releasing thermal data altogether. And just as the world was starting to question everything, the strangest detail of all appeared. For reasons no one could explain, reflected sunlight from ATLAS started carrying a faint polarization pattern, the same kind used by communication arrays to encode signals. When decoded, the polarization jumps aligned perfectly with the object's rotation phase and the repeating 6-hour pulse. It wasn't noise, it wasn't random scatter. The object was responding to light. Whenever James Webb increased exposure, the polarization shift grew sharper. Whenever observatories synchronized their measurements, the pulse strengthened slightly. It behaved like feedback, not active transmission, but reaction, like tapping the surface of a drum and hearing something inside tap back. That was when the tone inside NASA changed from confusion to fear. Whatever 3I-ATLAS is, it's not done, it's not fading, it's not falling apart. It's stabilizing, adapting, becoming something new after surviving the sun. The explosion didn't kill it. The explosion changed it. And now that the dust has settled, ATLAS is beginning to act less like a rock and more like an instrument waiting for the next cue. Whatever's coming next, the object is preparing for it. The only question left is why. As weeks passed, the pulse from 3I-ATLAS didn't weaken, it didn't drift into randomness or slowly fade the way natural echoes do. It grew sharper, more synchronized, more deliberate. And every time scientists thought they had finally understood the pattern, ATLAS changed again, shifting the rhythm just enough to force them back to the beginning. It was like trying to translate a language that kept evolving mid-sentence. Then something even stranger began happening. The pulse started to resonate through the solar system. Spacecraft from different agencies, American, European, Japanese, Indian, began detecting the same faint tremor in their instruments, not a malfunction, not interference. A repeating signal that arrived exactly when ATLAS's light flickered. Even satellites orbiting Earth registered microscopic fluctuations in the magnetosphere every time the object pulsed. It was as though the entire solar system had become part of an enormous tuning fork, vibrating to a frequency set by something drifting through the dark inside NASA. The fear was impossible to hide. Engineers noticed that the signal wasn't just consistent, it was converging. Each emission arrived a fraction of a second sooner than the last, like two gears slowly clicking into alignment. If the trend continued, the pulses would merge into a single continuous wave within a matter of years. When that date The object wasn't just reacting to our instruments, but interacting with our biology terrified everyone who understood the implications. Meanwhile, amateur astronomers kept doing what the agencies would not. In late December, multiple observers spotted a faint reflection in the asteroid belt. Brief, sharp, perfectly timed with the pulse atlas was still out there, still watching, still aligned with the frequency it had chosen. It hadn't vanished. It had just become harder to see. And through all of it, the countdown continued. Every 247 seconds, the solar system echoed. Every cycle pulled the timing closer to the convergence point, and every new measurement suggested the same impossible truth. Atlas wasn't drifting aimlessly. It wasn't fading into darkness. It was preparing for something. Something tied to the orbit of Earth. Something timed with terrifying precision. Something that has been unfolding since the moment it erupted near the sun. No one knows what will happen when the final pulse arrives. Maybe nothing, maybe everything, but the signal hasn't stopped. It hasn't weakened, and as the years pass, it feels less like a warning and more like a promise. Whatever 3I-ATLAS is, it is not broken, it is not lost, and it is not alone. It has endured longer than stars, survived forces that should have destroyed it, and awakened in the light of our sun with a purpose we still can't understand. And somewhere out there in the darkness, between the planets and the echoes and the countdown, it is still calling out, steady, patient, inevitable. Every 247 seconds, the void speaks, and the only question now is whether we will be ready when it stops.